بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We said is that we have two issues now always. Two main issues. The first issue is what is the ruling of not making up the missed days until
next Ramadan.
Alright, well. And the second ruling is those who do fall into that, do they have to do something extra? MashaAllah. Ahlan sahlan. Hayakallah. Marhaba. La, tafadhal. Hayakallah.
انتظر بعد
ما شاء الله بارك الله فيك الشيخ المغربي صار
انت مغربي
ريح المغرب كيف اهلا حياك الله مرحبا we say what sorry is that you have two issues now. You have to separate both of them, okay? Making up the missed days and paying an expiation for not doing it in the proper time. Aisha, she said, I would have missed days that I mincing or whatever the case may be. I couldn't fast, and I couldn't make up those days until Sha'ban. One narration says, or one variation of the narration says, لِمَكَانِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. I didn't have no time. If I wasn't mincing, then the Prophet ﷺ would want his huquq, his rights from me. You see what I'm saying to you? Okay, whether the Prophet knew about the missed days or not. يعني قد لا يكون يعني قد لا يظهر هذا. The Prophet ﷺ doesn't necessarily know every specific day that she's missing or she's fasting or not. Everybody understand this? Al-Muhim, at the end of the day, the fatwa that we read, he said is that which is known, not all, but that which is known, according to what he said, rahimahullah ta'ala, is that it's haram. You can't do it. Unless there's a legitimate excuse. A person was constantly sick, a person was traveling, whatever the case may be. And he also said that when a person does do that, there's nothing extra that they have to pay. No food that you have to give.
So even though the Aisha radiallahu anha delayed it, that does not mean that, I mean the fatwa said...
Well, see, she did it in Sha'ban and not to Ramadan.
Okay.
Sha'ban coming before Ramadan, on the borderline. The 11th month, right before
Ramadan.
Right.
Thank you.
Wallahu alam. Bismillah.
Yeah, if there is no authentic hadith on a certain matter, and you have a weak hadith, and because according, I don't know, you might probably know, according to the principle of some scholars, they use a weak hadith if there is not an authentic hadith. Is that true?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Question says, if there is no authentic hadith on an issue, is it permissible to use or to act upon a weak hadith based off of the principle of some scholars, so on and so forth? Perhaps you may know the answer. Is this true, etc.? We say, first and foremost, the concept of a sahih hadith and a weak hadith. There are levels of authentic hadiths. Some hadith which are authentic, scientifically graded, classed as authentic. And there's some which are strong, well-known, famous among the experts of hadith. They have reached certain levels of authenticity and genuineness. And similarly, there are different hadith which are scientifically classed as weak, quote-unquote, da'if, for one reason or another, according to the science of hadith. And there are different levels. Some hadith are extremely weak, some are fabricated, some are blatant lies. There's some hadith in which they're scientifically weak, the meaning is bad, the meaning is rejected and is foul. And some hadith which ridicule the Prophet and smear the reputation of Islam. And the hadith, even though they're famous and popular among the everyday Muslims, the imams, unfortunately, the khatibs, some of the most eloquent, fluent speakers of the Muslims may have some of these different weak ahadith, false, baseless practices. And then there's some ahadith which are scientifically weak, but they are famous, and the meanings are sound, the meanings are not rejected, the meanings are not foul, the meanings are clearly supported by the other authentic hadith, let alone the Quran. So that's first and foremost. So we have to lay out all of the chips on the table. is that there are different levels of sahih and different levels of da'if. They are on the same level. That's first and foremost. So therefore, hypothetically, there is an issue in which there's no sahih hadith on. Can we act upon a da'if hadith? We say the next point before we answer the question is that we have to make a difference between act upon and between mention. They're not the same. For me to mention one thing and for me to act upon it. For me to say there is a hadith that's weak but it says, and for me to act upon it and to implement it. This is what I believe, even though I know it's da'if, but I'm going to do it. And the reward or the punishment, so on and so on and so forth. They're two different things. So, did the ulama of hadith mention da'if hadith? Yes, they did. And they mentioned da'if hadith on different levels. Sometimes they mentioned them to warn from them. Sometimes they mentioned them to show you what is mentioned. There may not be, but this is what's mentioned. And sometimes they mention different da'if hadith to show the different fiqh doctrines and the different views and so on and so forth. And sometimes they mention those da'if hadith to show you how they clash with the authentic hadith. Everybody understand this? And an issue in which some of the ulama acted upon something in which there's no authentic hadith, it doesn't mean that they based it off of that da'if hadith. But there were other companions who held the view, whether it was off of that hadith or not. Everybody understand this? That some of the Sahaba, they did certain things, they practiced certain things, not necessarily off of that one specific hadith. So therefore, the ulama in general, people of hadith, people of fiqh in general, they have a concept. And that is when it comes to halal and haram, when it comes to the Muslims' aqidah, that which is taken is the Quran al-Kareem and the authentic ahadith. The Quran al-Kareem and the authentic ahadith. As far as when it comes to melting the heart, softening the heart, virtuous acts, zuhd, riqaq, the grave, qiyamah, exhortations, admonishments, and things like this, then the ulama of hadith of the past, they will mention these ahadith. They will mention them. Would they use them? Would they act upon them? We can say that they at least what? They mentioned them. And then that's what most of them did. Most of them, they did this. Then came the issue of, is it permissible to use weak hadiths when it comes to virtuous acts? Fada'il al-amal. Virtuous acts. Some of the ulama said no. There's more than enough in the authentic hadith. There's no need for that which is da'if, period. And others, they did say, yes, it's permissible to mention them and it's permissible to act upon them, but with conditions. The first condition is that the hadith, based off of this opinion, is that the hadith cannot be extremely weak. It cannot be a chain of narration in which there's a kadhab, a liar, a muttaham, someone who's accused of being a liar, someone who's abandoned, someone who's really, really, really bad. But it has to be a weakness which is slight. A weakness which is what? Which is slight. Number two, the second thing is they said that the hadith has to have a general supported meaning. It can't bring something that is totally new and only found in this one da'if narration. But it has to have a general gist that's in the Quran and in the authentic hadith. And thirdly, they say is that the person who mentions these hadiths or acts upon them, he cannot believe specifically that the Prophet ﷺ said it with conviction that the Prophet said it and I'm acting upon this. Now obviously you can see with the last two conditions is very extremely hypothetical. Because if the weak hadith is supported by other general texts, why not just act upon the other general texts from the other sahih hadiths in the Quran? Is there even a need for it? That's number one. Number two, how are you going to even do this and believe that the Prophet ﷺ didn't say it, and this da'if hadith gives a special reward for qiyam al-layl, or a special reward for dhikr, or a special reward for jihad, or a special reward for kada. Because if it's not for that specific hadith, everything that you can possibly think of is in the Quran and authentic hadith. From salah, tahara, sleep, eating, drinking, marriage, divorce, everything. So is that even plausible? Is there going to be an issue in which there's no sahih hadith and there's a da'if hadith that we even need, unless that thing gives something what? Specific. And if it isn't supported anything else specifically, then we can't accept it, even according to that view. Even according to what? to that view. And others, they say, those who hold this view, these group of ulama, this is true. Some ulama, they hold this view. They say that when you do mention to the people, you cannot mention it to the people and tell them that the Prophet ﷺ said it. What you have to tell them, it is mentioned in a hadith. It is said in a hadith. It's not the most authentic, but so on and so forth. We say, is that plausible in 2016? If you gave a khutbah and you said to the people in the khutbah, there is a hadith that states, the people will leave the masjid and they will say the Prophet ﷺ said. Rather, I make a bet, Nahyan, bet you, is that if I gave a khutbah and I said in the khutbah, there is a hadith that is weak, that's not the most authentic, that the Prophet ﷺ says, he who sits in the masjid after Salat al-Fajr, kada, kada, kada. 8 out of 10, if not 9 out of 10 people, they will leave the masjid, and what would they say, Khalid? The Prophet said it in an authentic hadith. Because the average person today and of yesterday is so far from the basics of the sciences of the Sunnah. The basics, not the expert entry, just the basics. The average person, they can't make a difference, even in Arabic, between Ruwiya an Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wa qala Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. One narration says Ruwiya Siqat al-Tamrid. It is mentioned that the Prophet said. And one narration says Qala Rasulullah, that the Messenger of Allah said. Most people don't have a difference between this. So that opinion about using weak hadith, mentioning da'if hadith, is very tricky and technical and hard to practice among the general masses today. Among what? The general masses of today. So therefore, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala is quoted to have said that a weak hadith is fonder to me than the opinion of men.
Alright.
He said a weak hadith is fonder to me than the opinion of men. Those who specialize in the speech of Imam Ahmad, the Hanabila, the ulama of the Hanbali madhab, they differ on the interpretation of the statement. Some of them say that what Imam Ahmad means by da'if hadith is not da'if today, but hasan. The hadith which has a slight flaw in it, slight, it's still acceptable. That's better to him than the opinion of men. And others, they say that he actually means what? Da'if hadith. I'd rather take a hadith that's weak than the opinion of fulan and fulan. Because it's weak scientifically doesn't mean that it's totally useless and baseless. As long as it doesn't go against that which is sahih. And as long as it doesn't have a foul rejected meaning, and as long as it doesn't have something that isn't strong enough to stand up by itself. So some people, they say this. So therefore, it has to be detailed an issue on what is the hadith and what is the issue. Issue of salah is not like an issue of, like I said, the akhirah, the grave, the punishment, the reward. Something which is generally mentioned and supported is not like the da'if hadith that says 20 rewards for saying this one statement. And the other hadith say that Allah loves that statement. That's specific now. 20 is a number, or a specific dua, or a specific practice, so on and so forth. Let alone the fact is that there is more than enough time, or no, there's more than enough hadith and too little time for that which is clearly sahih. That which is clearly sahih. So this is the view of some of the ulama in certain situations, as we said, not the legislation. Even in legislation sometimes, they may take a da'if hadith instead of the opinion of a person. But it all depends on the hadith. It depends on the situation. And Al-Hafidh ibn Rajab rahimahullah of the 8th century, he said regarding the madhab of Ahl al-Hadith, he says, إِنَّ لِكُلِّ حَدِيثٍ ذَوْقَهُ. Every single hadith has a specific taste. Every hadith has a what? A specific taste. There are general rules, the general principles, and there are specific rules and principles, but every single hadith has a what? A specific taste. There are no two swords made by this swordsmith that are the same. There are general ways of making the sword, general do's and don'ts of the sword, of forging it, the blade, the hilt, the handle, the decoration, the scabbard. But every sword is what? Handmade. And it's going to be some type of quote-unquote imperfection or flaw, or his own specific signature, signing, and this and that. هذا هو. And the same applies to hadith science. The same applies what? To hadith science. So it has to be detailed. It has to be detailed. But is that true? Did some people say things like this? That's without a doubt. And unfortunately, we have some students of knowledge who, because their knowledge was so much on the surface, it was just skimmed, literally just skimmed the surface, because they didn't have the time, or they didn't have the ability, or maybe they didn't have the talent, or maybe they didn't have the desire to deep beneath the surface, to scratch beneath the surface. They came back, or they went to their countries, and they went and they spread, no, no detail, no da'if hadith, da da da. And perhaps they mean good, but it caused more harm. Because you tell people one thing, when we open up the books of the ulama of past, we find something what? So it's a problem. So the concept of a person being zealous, overzealous, and a person wanting good, it has to be based upon fiqh. And if you didn't study long enough or hard enough, or Allah just didn't give me the ability that He gave this person, I'm not that talented, person should know how to slow down. But the concept of the youth being gung-ho, and when we say youth, it can be an older person too. There's some brothers who have hinda in their beards, and they're still youth. They're still what? They're still youth, mentally, unfortunately, when it comes to fiqh. And there's some people that could be young, that may have no hinda in their beards, and they're what? Shuyukh, mentally. They're old and mature mentally. Everybody understand this? So the concept of a person being gung-ho, and they just barely did what? Skim the surface. That's a problem. That's a big problem. It's something that we live today among the Muslims. Everything is a bid'ah. In actuality, the act is not a bid'ah. Not because of this one and that one, because it isn't bid'ah. But haste, lack of in-depth knowledge. Sometimes that causes what? More harm. Because I'm claiming, as I said before, that my food is organic. But in actuality, it's actually processed. The one who's selling you processed food is telling you that the food is what? It's processed. It's normal. This is normal fruits and vegetables. I don't have no special type of stuff. So the people, they know what to do, what not to do. But the problem comes in when a person comes and he says this is farm-raised fish. It's organic, no GMO, no color, no this. And it has what? Stuff in it. Then the people, they can't distinguish nothing. So they'll say Kitab and Sunnah, the way of the ulama, the way of the salaf. And they themselves, their knowledge is barely on the surface, let alone it's tainted. The opinion of a scholar of the 14th century is not the opinion of the Salaf as-Salih. The fahm, the understanding of the Salaf as-Salih is not the madhab of this one sheikh or these two sheikhs. So that's the big blow to the ummah. Because the people who say Sufiya, madhab, cultural Islam, normal basic Islam, they can barely make the adhan, barely make the salah, the people, they know that that's not sahih. They know that that's not the true Islam. But the problem comes when a stamp comes. This is the organic Islam, the true Islam, Fahm Salaf. And I barely what? Skim the surface of it. That's unfortunate. And this is what's happened in New York City and many other places. You think it's exaggeration, Khalid? Without a doubt. But it comes worse when it's gung-ho. There's one thing, me leaving Egypt, me leaving Medina, coming back after a few years, barely studying Arabic, but now I'm gung-ho. I'm going to spread it and push it and throw it down in people's face and go, and then talk about you and degrade. And here comes a problem. You're pushing something that you're saying is organic and it's full of food coloring. It's full of chemicals, insecticides. Whether they know it or whether they don't know it. It doesn't have to mean they have to have an evil intention. It doesn't have to mean that a person is an evil person. It doesn't mean that. But a person could be misinformed. And they have a good niyyah. But, as Abdullah Mas'ud said, كَمْ مِن مُرِيدٍ لِلْخَيْرِ لَمْ يَبْلُغْهُ. He says, how many people wanted good and they didn't reach it? They didn't what? They didn't reach it. So the people have to give respect to the sciences of Islam. Is that it's an in-depth thing that existed before you came along. So if you wish to spread it and pass it on, there's nothing wrong with it. But know your what? The level. Everybody understand this? Wallahu ta'ala alam.